What really happened to Madeleine McCann? Tonight we separate fact from fiction and ask who can be trusted in this tragic tale. Hello and welcome to the programme. Well, later on tonight, lawyers in the dock. Banks and clients are claiming that high-flying solicitors have ripped them off. But is it just the tip of the iceberg? And why are solicitors still allowed to police themselves? First, though, tonight, the tragic case of Madeleine McCann. It's every parent's nightmare that your child could seemingly vanish off the face of the earth. It's almost 6 months since little Maddie went missing in the Algarve, and it's a story that has gripped and horrified people all over the world. But despite a massive international search, we're still no closer to finding out what really happened on that night. Within the past hour, Kate and Jerry McCann, her parents, released a sketch of a man they say was spotted at the scene on the night. They hope this might provide the breakthrough they've been praying for. Well, up until now, we've had endless rumours, leaks and speculation. And at this stage, we don't know who to believe or who to trust. Primetime's Katie Hannon has travelled to Portugal to find out exactly what is known about the night Madeleine disappeared and to separate fact from fiction in this tragic tale. This is her report.
We have some breaking news for you this morning that's just coming into us. It is feared that a 3-year-old British girl has been abducted in Portugal.
Please, if you have Madeleine, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother and sister.
The 3-year-old, whose grandmother is from Donegal, is believed to have been abducted from the family's holiday apartment in Portugal.
Please continue to pray for Madeleine. She's lovely.
It's now almost 6 months since that traumatic night here at the Ocean Club in Praia de Luz, when Madeleine McCann was reported missing from the apartment behind me. As the story snowballed into a global media phenomenon, truth inevitably became one of the early casualties. We've come to Praia de Luz in order to isolate what facts can be established from the whirlwind of rumour and often lurid speculation that have engulfed this extraordinary story.
Many of us have formed firm opinions on what became of Madeleine McCann, based on what we think we know about the case. Tonight we look at the suspects, the crime scene, the police and the DNA and ask just how many of the reported facts stand up to serious scrutiny. We've been at the house run by his aunt a few miles from Praia de Luz. As an arguido or suspect, he is legally precluded from talking to us about the case. His aunt described how it all began.
Well, we were having dinner in a friend's house in Praia de Luz, and she got a text, and they said turn on the television, and there was Robert being arrested, and we just couldn't believe it. I mean, we both burst into tears and just didn't know what to do.
They went home, pursued by Sky News reporters. Shortly afterwards, 11 police officers came to search their home.
After that, it just became surreal. We were bugged, telephones were bugged, we were police surveyed. We had another raid at 7 o'clock in the morning with all the dogs and the police searching everywhere. It just went on and on.
Murat was living at his mother's home near the McCann's apartment in Praia de Luz. It was his constant presence on the scene, translating for the police and the media in the days after Madeleine disappeared, that raised suspicions. Amid a blaze of publicity, he was brought in for questioning and made an arguido. In the deluge of headlines that followed, we read about Murat's glass eye, allegations that he was sexually interested in children, and that the police had porn on his computer. The police are still holding his computers and have never indicated if they found questionable material on them.
He hasn't got a glass eye, he has a detached retina. He has no paedophilia on his computer. He has never had any links to paedophilia. And the only photographs he has of children are of his own daughter, Sophia, clothed, I might add.
Robert Murat says he was at home with his mother on the night Madeleine vanished. However, 3 witnesses have placed him at the apartment on that night.
There was a lot of pressure. The police had to have a suspect, and there's one man pointed out by some friends, some British friends who were here on vacation with the McCanns, and there were 2 or 3 who said that there was this man looking like this here near the apartment, and that description fits to Robert Murat. That's why he was made an arguido, but the police didn't find any evidence that puts Murat here.
Those 3 witnesses are Fiona Payne, Jane Oldfield and Russell O'Brien, who were among the 7 friends who were dining with the McCanns that night.
It really appears that he's got no sort of connection to the case. This obviously, despite a number of eyewitnesses putting him at the scene the night of Madeleine's disappearance.
The ones that closed their shops, their businesses, their bars, restaurants, to go and help search, they all know Robert. They have all been interviewed and nobody saw Robert on that night. How come 3 complete strangers who've never met Robert before said they saw him on that night? There's something wrong there, I'm sorry. That question has to be answered.
The Portuguese police have said they want to re-interview all the friends who were with the McCanns that night. To date, the only other official suspects in this case are Kate and Jerry McCann. Under the unprecedented glare of the world's media, much has been made of their apparently extraordinary composure in the face of such appalling tragedy.
Well, obviously, Portuguese police do have their psychological profilers working on this, and they would have carefully studied the mannerisms and the behaviour of the McCanns. Obviously, what they have, I mean, in Southern Europe, people are much more outward, much more emotional. They're much more quick. I would have been surprised to see Kate and Jerry behave the way they did. Not a tear shed. Voice, the tone of voice remaining the same level at all times.
Such is the focus of this issue that a display of emotion on Spanish television last night made international headline news.
I'm Madeleine's mummy. I know she was taken from that apartment and she's out there. And I want her back. I mean, that is all. I mean, everything else, I'm sorry, is rubbish.
To condemn them for not doing what we want them to do, whether it's show tears or not show tears or act in a certain way, when their life has been shattered by this evil, is extraordinarily selfish of us to say, do it so we can appreciate you more.
Just because they don't cry, obviously, doesn't mean that they're not grieving inside. Doesn't mean they don't cry in private. Believe you me, they do, and I've seen it. I can't go into any details surrounding the police case on this. However, suffice to say that criminal profilers involved in this in the early stages advised them not to show overt emotion if they could possibly help it, because it is often the case that abductors enjoy seeing the suffering that they are causing, and as a result they have been keeping it in check. That is another element in this, but do not criticise them for not appearing to cry on cue.
Another key issue is exactly how far away from their children they were dining that night, if this should be considered irresponsibly lax, and if the arrangement was a once-off. Early reports from the McCann family said they dined just 40 metres away from their apartment, and likened it to eating in the back garden while the children slept upstairs. However, a visit to the Ocean Club complex raises questions about this analogy.
Behind this wall and at the far side of the resort swimming pool is the Ocean Club's tapas bar. Now, in order to get from there to the McCann's apartment here, you have to exit onto a public road and enter the apartment through the small gate.
The distance is closer to double the 40 metres first suggested, even further by foot. Their view was obscured, and they were certainly well out of earshot of a crying child.
We feel guilty because we were not there at that moment, although, Kate has emphasised we are very responsible parents, and I don't think what we actually were doing was in any way irresponsible.
Initially, family friends suggested that the decision to leave the children alone would have been a once-off.
And had they left the little girl in the room on her own before?
No, I mean they've got twins as well, so they're very careful, and they don't leave them.
However, a source close to the family has confirmed to Primetime that the McCanns left their children alone in their apartment every night, bar the evening they arrived.
It is a British, if you like, approach to get your children washed, bathed, bed. early evening if you can, so that you have something of an evening to yourself. It's just a different cultural thing. That doesn't mean that they were wrong. Nobody feels more guilty than Jerry or Kate over the decision they took jointly to leave their children in that position that night. However, that said, they felt that they had a perfectly proper system of checking. She was never unchecked for more than 20 minutes to half an hour at any one time.
The other widely reported claim is that the McCanns sedated their children. They have always denied this.
There's absolutely no way we used any sedative drugs or anything like that.
This story emerged from reports that the twins slept through the pandemonium on the night Madeleine went missing and were still asleep when taken from their beds at 2 a.m. Primetime has spoken to a witness who confirmed that the twins did sleep through that night. The claim that these suspicions were confirmed by DNA evidence first appeared in the French tabloid newspaper François on September 13th. Primetime could not independently confirm this story.
We had a run of stories. We had 7 children in the apartment. Not true. We had the children were drugged. Not true. Jerry and Kate can prove that if they need to. Those stories will fall away for the ill-informed, malicious, malevolent misinformation that they are being placed out there as.
But have the McCanns been responsible for spreading misinformation themselves? While Kate McCann was being questioned by the Portuguese police, her sister-in-law, Philomena McCann, made this dramatic claim.
They tried to get her to make a statement suggesting that she had accidentally killed Madeleine. That's what was put to her through her lawyer. And, you know, that they would kind of make a plea bargain with her so that she might serve 2 years in jail.
Kate's lawyer later said no such deal was offered.
No formal deal may have been offered. I will not comment. I will not confirm or deny that. I'm just saying that the lawyer's statement stands for what it said at the time and was accurate at the time. However, there was enough, shall we say, movement on the case that night that was open to interpretation, put it that way.
Kate McCann said last night that she is disillusioned with the media. Were the McCanns wrong to court the press so energetically?
The papers were writing stories about the papers and creating stories out of nothing, and now it's just silly. But the media's been the agent that Kate and Jerry needed to get this story out.
The initial accounts from Portugal appear to indicate a cut-and-dried case of child abduction.
They were just, you know, watching the hotel room and going back every half hour, and the shutters have been broken open and they've gone into the room and taken Madeleine.
Is this a little girl that's the sort of little girl that could have wandered up on her own? Would that be at all an option to look at? Or do you
No, not at all. It's been broken into.
In the hours and days that followed, the McCanns' family and friends in the UK told reporters that the shutters were variously broken, jimmied open or smashed. In fact, the shutters were not in any way damaged.
There was no evidence of a break-in, but I'm not going to go into the detail. I can tell you off camera, but I'm not going to go into the detail on camera. But everything I've said, everything that's I'm not going to get into the so we'll stop. But essential to say that the Kate and Jerry are firmly of the view that somebody got into the apartment and took Madeleine out of the window as their means of escape. And to do that, they did not necessarily have to tamper with anything. They got out of the window fairly easily.
The McCanns say they believe this intruder was the man seen carrying a child by their friend Jane Tanner at 9:15. Questions have been raised about Tanner's account, as she appeared to be the only witness to this event. But Primetime has spoken to a Drogheda man who says he and his family also saw a man carrying a sleeping blonde child on this quiet side street about 5 minutes' walk from the McCanns' apartment. However, this was about half an hour after Tanner's alleged sighting. He has given a statement to the Portuguese police to this effect. This investigation has been run by the Polícia Judiciária. Known here as the PJ, it's an elite force that specialises in the investigation of serious crime. Since Madeleine McCann was reported missing, it has come under unprecedented scrutiny and attracted much criticism. Any consumer of the British media must now be convinced that the Portuguese police are at best incompetent and at worst maliciously motivated. One major plank of that criticism is that they were slow to grasp the seriousness of this case. Local journalists dispute this.
There were police officers coming from the whole country, other Portuguese police forces working on this case, and from day one, when Madeleine disappeared, in a couple of hours there was like 100 police officers working on this case.
But there is no disputing the major PR disaster that was the appointment of Chief Inspector Amaral to lead the investigation. In June, it emerged that Amaral was one of a number of police officers implicated in an alleged case of police brutality. By coincidence, it was another case of a missing child in the Algarve. Joanna Cipriano was just 8 when she disappeared in 2004. Although her body has never been found, her mother and uncle were convicted of her murder. Her mother, Leonor, claims she only confessed because she was beaten while in police custody.
She says that 6 or 7 or 8 men beat her, not at the same time. Now 2, then they come other 2 or 3, and it happened for, she says, many times.
The police deny she was beaten, claiming she received her injuries accidentally.
They say that she fall down in the stairs.
While no individual police officers have been identified as administering the alleged beatings, the prosecutor has pressed charges against 5 officers, including Amaral, because Leonor received her injuries while in their custody.
He believes that he has enough proofs. He has medical exams, and where they say, okay, someone beat Leonor because this is not of an accident of the stairs or nothing.
Chief Inspector Amaral has now been replaced by Paolo Rebello. But do his officers have a reputation for brutality and incompetence?
It's like a good family that sometimes has a bad son. It happens not in Portugal but in everywhere and in all the police. But everybody respects the police because the Portuguese police is a...
I think if you had to ask anybody out in the street what they think about the Portuguese police, and especially the Polícia Judiciária, it would all be respect. As for, and I think that's basically due to their results. They're highly efficient. They solve difficult cases, and they have to do often the dirty work. They have to deal with paedophiles, murders, rapes, and they end up solving them.
Last weekend, the new head of the investigation admitted what has been clear for some months, that despite the strictly secret nature of the Portuguese judicial system, some police officers have been leaking to the media. So have journalists been used by the police to smoke out the McCanns?
Why are you so sure your police sources are any better than some of the other sources that get quoted and don't seem to be true?
I rely on my sources because everything they say from the beginning, since the beginning, to this day, they are correct, and they don't speculate. They just tell me what they are certain, and they don't speculate. They don't say we think the McCanns, we know for sure that the McCanns are guilty, we know that for sure that they're not. They say what we have so far points to this direction, but we're not sure.
It was traces of blood and body fluid recovered from the McCanns' apartment and the car they hired 25 days after Madeleine disappeared that prompted the dramatic shift in this investigation, which saw the McCanns named as arguidos. Leaked reports about the DNA tests of these samples have been contradictory. For every report that says it is damning, another insists that it is inconclusive. In fact, the only official comment from the Portuguese police is that they don't expect the final DNA results to prove definitive. The McCanns claim that despite their many hours being questioned by the police, they too remain in the dark about the extent of the alleged evidence the police have uncovered.
I would have thought that this DNA evidence would have had to have been put to Kate and Jerry when they were being questioned by the Polícia Judiciária.
You would have thought so. I cannot discuss the interview process or anything that goes to the heart of the inquiry.
Just for clarity, you're telling me that Kate and Jerry have not been informed of any traces of DNA having been found in the car or in the...
I can't say that. That's a reasonable assumption for you to make.
But how reliable is DNA evidence, and how much is it likely to reveal? Primetime went to London to the lab that worked on the Kerry babies case and the Linda Chamberlain Dingo baby case to get some answers. Our DNA expert explained that forensic scientists look at about 20 individual genetic traits or markers in any one sample. But could the fact that DNA from Madeleine's siblings was also in the car complicate matters?
15 or 16 markers would give you enough evidence to provide a strong pointer that it was more likely to be Madeleine's than somebody unrelated to Madeleine. And you should be able to, if you know what the types are of the close relatives, you should be able to distinguish Madeleine's DNA from theirs just from 15 or 16 markers.
Some reports have suggested that the DNA test on the sample of body fluid found in the car proves that Madeleine is dead. However, Dr. Cindercombe Court says DNA tests cannot determine this.
It's not possible to say whether the DNA has come from a dead person or from a live person.
If it is Madeleine's DNA, could it have been transferred from items of clothing or toys that Madeleine touched?
It's not possible to say how it's got there. There are various reasons that it might have got there, either because it's been deposited there directly, because it's been in contact with Madeleine's body or fluid directly from Madeleine, that it might have come from a secondary source, such as any item that Madeleine might have had a lot of contact with that is covered with lots of her DNA, lots of cells from her, could have been transferred to anybody who touches that object, for example, and transferred onto another item.
But it is unconfirmed reports that the DNA was discovered under the carpet in the boot of the car that have raised the most serious questions.
The place where the DNA was found inside the car, it's not an excessive place. It's not a place where you can just throw a clothes inside, and that's why they really think that they hide the body.
While this has been widely reported, in fact, the police have never confirmed where the DNA was actually found. In any case, all three suspects insist that they have nothing to fear from the forensic tests. "175 days on, there is no doubting the anti-McCann sentiment in Portugal, nor the depth of outrage felt by their supporters in the UK. Robert Murat's supporters too feel violated by the handling of the investigation.
Kate and Jerry did not harm their daughter, either accidentally or deliberately. They certainly were not involved in any covering up or disposal of her body. Therefore, anything the police have that gives them cause for concern is entirely explicable and will be explained should it come to it.
The forensics and what the police will find, that's what's important. They will find the truth, and let's hope they find it soon.
Ultimately, we appear no closer to establishing the only fact that matters. What did become of Madeleine McCann?
That report from Katie